Hello and welcome to the second set of videos of the second module of Intermediate Macroeconomics. I'm Sergio Campo and I'm the instructor for this course. In this second set of videos, we're going to be talking about a specific paper published in the journal Econometrica in 2014 by Atif Mian and Mian Sufi. The name of the paper is What Explains the 2007-2009 Drop in Employment. It is actually part of a pair of papers that Professors Mian and Professor Sufi published very close together. The first one you can see here. This is the main paper we're going to be talking about. The second one, it's a companion paper called Household Balance Sheets, Consumption, and the Economic Slump. Professors Mian and Sufi really push forward the idea that demand shocks affecting the wealth of consumers have important implications for driving the business cycle and in particularly affecting employment in the aggregate. We're going to be developing those ideas during this set of videos, but I want to invite you to look at their research a bit more closely. They also have a book published on the same topic called House of Debt. So you can also go to their websites and look at their book if you're interested in this. Now, why these papers? Well, they deal with big questions in macroeconomics. Big questions like what causes aggregate fluctuations and how can the government react to recessions. It is very important to know what the role is of aggregate demand shocks in driving fluctuations in the economy, to know how the government can react to them. The papers also show how to think about data in macroeconomics. So far, we've been mostly focusing on models and how the model works, what the model implies. But models cannot work on their own. We need to look at the data to know what is the model supposed to be capturing. And so we're going to be paying a lot of attention to how we can use data to identify the origin of fluctuations. The paper also is going to show us how to extend the type of models that we've used to think about economic issues like how different places can be affected differently during a recession, or how different sectors of the economy are differentially exposed to shocks, and so some sectors might do better than others. This is going to be very important, but we're going to go back to that last point by the end of this set of videos. At the end, we can use the model that we're going to develop to also think about the effect of government spending during recessions. And that's a topic that we're going to develop through some problems that I put forward in the problem set. Now, let me give you a quick overview of the paper. The big question is, what are the mechanisms behind large drops in employment during recessions? And what Mian and Sufi are going to tell us is perhaps it's changes in housing net worth. So in particular, changes in the price of houses can affect the net worth, or if you like, the wealth of households. These households are the consumers in our model. And so basically what they're saying is as net worth goes down, so does the demand of consumers. The method they're going to employ is they want to identify the effect of net worth on employment using cross-sectional variation across US counties. So because different counties are affected differently in the change of net worth of their households, they should also have different variation in terms of their employment. So the idea here is that counties where net worth has decreased the most are also counties where employment has decreased the most. The main result they're going to find is that in fact a declining housing net worth reduces employment by suppressing consumer demand, and they can quantify this showing that a 10 percentage point decline in net worth is associated with a 3.7 percentage point decline in non-tradable employment. And I'm going to go back to what non-tradable employment means soon. Let me first motivate a little bit what's happening. This paper uses data from the US and focuses on the Great Recession. The Great Recession, it's the global financial crisis that occurred between mid-2008 and mid-2009. Of course, the consequences of this crisis were very long-lasting, and the consequences of the recession in terms of low employment, low consumption, really lasted for almost a decade. But the recession per se was concentrated during this period. And we can see here the series for employment in the US going down dramatically during the recession. So that's the main question we have. What is behind this large drop in employment? Well, the first thing that we're going to see when we look at the data is that employment didn't go down the same way across all places in the US. Here I'm showing employment indices for different cities in the US. And so, for example, this purple line, it's going to be Las Vegas. Las Vegas had a very sharp and very big drop in employment. The orange line is going to be Miami and Fort Lauderdale in Florida. And they also had a very large drop in employment. Whilst other series, like the one for Minneapolis, that one didn't have such a big down. The one for Boston and Cambridge also didn't have such a big decrease in employment. And the authors want to relate this to the following graph. In this graph, I'm showing you the evolution of the price of housing across all those same cities. And what you see is that it is precisely the ones like Miami and Las Vegas that had very high increases in houses and then very sharp decreases in the price of houses. Sorry, not increases in houses, but increases in the price of housing. Whilst other cities, like I was mentioning Boston and Minneapolis, didn't have such large increases in the build up to the Great Recession, and then also didn't have such great decreases in employment. So this is the basic correlation that the authors see in the data that they want to exploit more carefully. So the paper is going to propose that changes in housing net worth are the catalyst for large changes in employment. They want to tie these through the effect that housing net worth is going to have as a negative wealth effect to consumers, and further a tightening of borrowing constraints to consumers. Many consumers can get credit by using their houses as collateral. When the price of houses goes down, their borrowing constraints tighten. We've seen these, for example, in one of the problems in problem set 1. And we can also look at chapter 10 in Williamson for other examples of this type of behavior. Now, here is the key part of their model. Since net worth changes more in some places than others, those places where it decreases the most should also be the most affected. And so they want to identify the effect of net worth by exploiting geographical variation in the change of net worth, so that they can see if consistently places with larger decreases in net worth also were places with larger decreases in employment. Now, we're going to be going through all of these in a future video, but there are problems with this identification. One of the issues is that employment in a country is an equilibrium outcome. And so it's also affected by other factors different than net worth. It might be that there is different composition of industries. And it is not because of net worth that employment is going down, but because certain industries being more open, more affected by the shock that's originating the recession. There might also be trade shocks, perhaps foreign demand for the goods they sell, or differences in credit conditions. So part of what we're going to do as we go through the paper is figuring out how we can exploit the variation in the data to overcome these identification issues and isolate the effect of net worth. Now, to do that, they are first going to have to divide the economy into two big sectors, the tradable and the non-tradable sector. The tradable sector is going to produce goods and services that can be sold to other counties. So it is influenced not only by the economic forces in the county where they are placed, but also in other counties. Here you can think of things like manufacturing or financial services, where you can have a bank in Toronto giving you a service here in London. You can also buy here in London a car that was made in Michigan. So these type of products and services that can be traded across geography, these we call tradable. The other category, the non-tradable sector, produces goods and services that are only sold inside the county. And so its employment depends entirely on local variables. And typically we think of these as services and restaurants. So of course, it's hard for you to order from a restaurant that's located in Vancouver or getting a haircut from somebody that's located in Quebec. So those things have to be local, And so the local conditions of demand are going to have a larger effect on non-tradable employment. So here is the key. We're going to test whether the change in tradable employment is correlated with the change in net worth. And we should see that that correlation should not depend on what's happening in the specific county, but what's happening in the whole country. While the change in non-tradable employment should be correlated with what's happening in the individual county because it depends on the individual county's demand. Okay, we're going to be coming back to that same issue as we move through the different evidence that the authors are going to provide. Now, the outline for what's left of this series of videos is the following. First, we're going to be talking about the data that the authors are going to be using. Then we're going to see how we can use that data to provide evidence of the effect of changes of net worth on employment. And we're going to see how alternative explanations don't seem to match the data. Then we're going to develop a model. This is going to be a model of what's happening with demand shocks across different counties. And we're going to be able to use this model to ask what's going to happen to employment in these counties when there is a crisis originated in a decrease in demand, and how thinking about flexible or sticky prices is going to be very important to understand the type of effects we're seeing. And then finally, we're going to talk about evidence from the data that lets us think about which version of the model is better suited for our analysis. Thank you.